Hey everybody, it's Mandy from Chapel Forge. So I showed in a previous video that we smoked the chickens and turkeys that we raised in the spring. I really needed freezer space. We went to Blessings of Hope in Lancaster where we get food for 60 cents a pound. I'll link that video too so that you can see what that's all about. Unfortunately, if you're not local to Lancaster, it probably isn't that beneficial, but it's still a super cool thing. Maybe you can start one in your area. So we needed to make space because we went there and we got a bunch of bacon and strawberries and some other things that needed frozen, and I needed to make space. So we borrowed a friend's smoker. We smoked our chickens and our turkeys on a rainy day and it worked out great. So today I'm going to show you how to make broth. Obviously, you don't have to have smoked meat or whatever to make broth. If you buy a chicken at Walmart and you have the carcass left and you really want to stretch your dollar, you can throw that carcass in your roaster. If you raise your own birds and you have your carcasses, you can throw them in a roaster. Whatever. You can, if you don't feel like you have enough to make broth at a time, what I used to do before we raised our own birds is I would just, like if we would buy meat at the store, which is what we did then, I would just have bags in the freezer, and in those bags I'd have one that would have like ends of celery and like the peels of onions and ends of garlic or whatever. Like I would throw all that in a bag and that would kind of like flavor my broth. And then I'd have another bag that would have like beef bones or like red meat bones, and then I'd have another one that would have white meat bones. So you can do that too, and you can just kind of like fill your gallon Ziplocs, and once they're full, you could start your broth. So today we have all of the meat that we smoked, and I'm gonna kind of make like smoky broth. Some people, when I mentioned this on Facebook that we were working on it, some people were like, well, what are you going to do with that? What do you do with smoky broth? So there's so many things. Obviously, we can use it in soup. It's also really delicious in chili if you want to use it as a base in chili. If you do like a white chicken chili, it's especially delicious. So I'm not like low on broth, but I probably only have maybe 20 or 30 quarts of broth on the shelf right now. That's typically a winter project for me. Broth, beans, and meat are usually the things I work on in the winter because obviously there's not fresh produce readily available. So those are things that I can work on in my pressure canner over the winter. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to take your roasting pan and you're just going to fill it with your carcasses, your bones. We're putting the skins in. We don't have a problem with eating the skins, but these got kind of dark from smoking, so we're just going to throw them in there for some extra flavor. Like I said, you could put in celery, onions, really whatever. You don't have to flavor it with anything extra. You can literally just do bones and skins, which is what I typically do. I have the heads and feet from when we got these turkeys done. So I'm going to grab those out of the freezer and get those thrown in here so we can get some really good collagen out of it. If you were doing beef broth, if you had knuckle bones and things, you can get good collagen out of that. Cow's tail you can get good collagen from, and the collagen when we can it is going to show up as like a thick layer of fat basically at the top, and it's so good for you. So don't be discouraged if you see that thick layer of fat. That's good. You want that. So first step is to get all of your bones and things ready and throw them in the roaster. All right, so I have one roaster full of bones. So basically what I'm going to do is just cover it with water. I'm going to put it on like, I don't know, 250 or so. We're awake, so it's not like I'm letting it go overnight yet. We might let it go overnight tonight, I'm sure, because I'm not going to pressure can it today. But while we're like here and able to monitor it, I'll just put it on 250, and then as soon as Zad has these whole birds done, they'll go in that roaster and we'll start the second batch. But at this point, if you want to put in your onion peels, celery pieces, and you can put in like whole, like, you know, cut up pieces of new onion. It doesn't have to be scraps. You could season it if you wanted to. You don't have to. You can keep it plain. I'm not seasoning it because these were seasoned when we smoked them. They have this, you know, taste of the smoke, so I don't need to season these. Even if I didn't have any of that and these were just cooked like plain, I still don't season it because we season it when we make the meal. So that part's totally up to you. So just cover with water, put the lid on, put it on like 250 and let it go. All right, so I am gonna kick these down to like 200. It's like 8 o'clock. Not that we're going to bed anytime soon, but I'm gonna kick these down. You can see that the broth is already starting to get dark. It smells amazing. So we're just gonna put these down on 200. Probably before we go to bed, I'll turn them off. They'll stay hot, so I'm not super worried about it. And then in the morning, we'll strain everything out and I'll show you that process. All right, so I let these go overnight. I brought them both back into the kitchen. So basically what I'm gonna do is I am just gonna pull all of the bones and the fat and all that kind of stuff out. So you can see here, it's really nice and dark. It smells amazing. So I'm gonna use probably like this one, scoop out what I can, and then I'll probably need to do my bucket with the strainer and the flour sack towel to try to get out all the little bits and get it kind of as smooth or clear or whatever as possible. All right, so I already dumped one bus tub of scraps to the chickens. I'm sure I'm gonna get this question, how can I feed chicken to my chickens? Because they're omnivores and they eat everything and they don't really care what it is. So they have all the scraps and they are out there having a feast. I have my bucket here with my strainer. I love this strainer. I'll link it in the description. If you do any kind of canning at all, I feel like you need one. It's the best. I'm gonna put a flour sack towel over my strainer. Just for the sake of keeping bits out of it. I guess this step is kind of optional. If you don't care if you have little bits in it, then don't do a towel. You should probably strain it. I mean, unless you use like I could probably use this hand strainer, but that would take a lot more time. So that's totally up to you. If you're doing a smaller batch, you could do something like that. There's multiple ways to strain. None of them are right or wrong. All right, that's fine. All right, so I almost filled a 5-gallon bucket. I probably have 4.5 gallons here. I got my jars ready. I'm gonna put these in regular because why waste a wide mouth? It's just liquid. That's usually my rule of thumb. If it's liquid or sauce or something, I try to put it, and I don't always follow this, but I try to put it in a regular. If it's something like peaches or something where it's just a little bit easier, if you're doing like long dill spears or something, then I typically try to use a wide mouth if I can. So I am going to get these filled, wipe the rims so well with vinegar because broth is so greasy. This is usually the thing that I have the worst trouble with siphoning with is broth, because it gets up under the seal and then it causes the seal, you know, not to go down, and I almost always have one that doesn't seal when I do broth. So I'm gonna wipe the rims really well with vinegar. We'll get these in the pressure canner. All right, so we got 19 quarts of broth, which is pretty awesome. We need to do these for 25 minutes for quarts at 10 pounds of pressure. I'll link this book in the description. This is probably my favorite book for pressure canning. Obviously, I have the Ball Blue book, which I use for almost everything water bathing. There's some pressure canning stuff in there, but not a ton, and I really like this one to fill in the gap, so I'll link it in the description. It is obviously well loved, just like my other one is. So because I got 19, mine holds 14 at a time, so I'm just gonna split them like 10 and 9 or whatever, and run these. So 25 minutes, 10 pounds of pressure. I'll give you a quick rundown of the pressure canner as I do it. I do talk about it pretty extensively in some other videos, but I'll give you the quick pointers that you need to know to pressure can safely. All right, so I have the All-American 930. Like I said, it holds 14 quart jars. It comes with 2 of these racks because you can double stack quarts. So you want one to be on the bottom so that's not touching, just like in water bath canning. Put your other one on top, and then you can put your second layer in. I'm gonna do, I guess I'll do, well, I guess I'll do 4. No, I'll do 3 in this one. Unfortunately, I wish I would have had 28. That would have been ideal, but that's okay. So we're gonna put these in. We're gonna get the lid locked. So as I'm locking these on, I forgot to mention, you need to put some water in the bottom. So you're not covering them like in water bath canning. Put in like 2 or 3 inches of water when you're putting on your lid. I love this canner because there's like no doubt that the lid's on correctly. So you kind of do it the way you do, you know, like lug nuts or whatever. So you just kind of go around, tighten these down. You're not going to put your weight on yet. That comes later. So I'm just going around making sure that all of these are tight. You don't have to crank them down super hard, but like you want them to be pretty snug. And I'm gonna do this outside because I still have the propane burner set up on the front porch. So I'm gonna take this outside and we'll get this. All right, so we got our burner lit, we got our canner on. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna wait for a steady stream of steam to come out of this hole for 10 minutes. When that happens, I'm gonna put the weight on. I'm gonna do 10 pounds of pressure because that's what my elevation calls for. Your gauge is gonna toggle probably around 11-ish, which is fine. You don't really wanna dip below 10, at least for very long. If you dip below for like a minute or two, it's not like the end of the world. You know, obviously you're not gonna want it to get to like 30 or anything. That's gonna be a little bit hazardous, but it'll probably just naturally toggle somewhere between like 10 and 12-ish or something. Mine usually hangs around 11. As you get to know like your burners and things like that, you'll sort of start to figure out where the sweet spot is. So we're gonna wait for 10 minutes of steam to come out of that and then put the weight on. All right. So I let the steam run for 10 minutes. I turned my burner down a little bit because my pressure on the gauge was getting a little higher than I like. It was kind of near like 18, so that's too high. So I turned the burner down a little bit. The goal here, officially the book says you want like 4 shakes a minute. You just kind of want it to be a nice steady, you just want it to be kind of a nice steady, exactly what it's doing here. Kind of shaking, you know, a few jiggles a minute, that kind of thing. You want your pressure gauge. I'm up around 16, so it's coming down. It'll go down more as I just turn the burner down. So we are going to start a timer for 25 minutes. All right, so we turn the burner off. We're down to 0. This is super important. Don't take the lid off. Don't take the weight off until it's down to 0. So usually your weight's pretty hot. You might hear a little hiss. That's pretty normal. And then you're going to start to undo these. Clearly they're a little hard to do one-handed, but you're gonna start to undo these, take the lid off, and then like I've said before, I usually do let the jar sit there for just a couple minutes, kind of, especially if they're still bubbling, to try to prevent as much siphoning as I can. All right, so my last batch is done. I didn't check these, but I got all seals on these, which is fantastic. I had no siphoning. Like typically when I do broth, I usually have like that greasy film in the bottom in the water, like the little bubbles or whatever, grease bubbles. I had no siphoning in that first batch. I'm not sure about this one because I just took the lid off, but that's a miracle. I'm super excited about that. And seriously, the ticket to that, you know, in my experience, is wipe them so well with vinegar. So anyway, we got all of these jars of broth. I am planning this winter to show you many videos about how we use this food. So I get tons of questions often like, okay, you put up 50 pints of X, what the heck do you do with all that? So I'm going to make videos this winter showing you guys how we do this, how we use this food in meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, whatever. So look forward to that. That'll be coming this winter. We have a couple more canning projects to do, just small like this one, nothing extravagant. So those will be coming at you. So if you have questions about how to do this, how to make broth, pressure can, any of that, let me know. We'll see you next time.